Okay, so when we go to create our clay project, we're going to put our mat, we're using a paper mat this time instead of our canvas mat, but we're going to put our mat underneath our project. You're going to have a bag of clay tools. So the first thing I would do is take those items out. So you should have a piece of cardboard, you should have a plastic fork and knife, you should have a wooden skewer, a toothpick, a sponge, and of course our plastic bag. You will get some clay from the teacher. It might be pre-bagged, or the teacher might give it to you directly from the main box of clay. So we're going to take that out. So my recommendation, depending on how much clay you start with, depends on the size of your final project. So my first practice that I started here, you can see I am making a hippo candy dish here. So it's still in process, but here's my hippo so far. When I first started this one, I used about half of my brick. Now, I'm making the blocks of clay a little bit smaller, so I would maybe go a little bit more, like if I wanted to make something as big as this, I would probably use about this much clay. Now, the thing to keep in mind, we have 2 days to construct. So I would try and go a little bit smaller. It's a little bit easier to get it smoothed out and get all of the pieces that you want and details that you want attached. So I would work a little bit smaller. Current project, I'm gonna say about half is a good size. So that would give us more along the lines of a pinch pot that is this size. Okay, now again, if you want to do like a bowl or a mug, you might use like 2/3. So to figure it out, if we break it up into 3 parts, if you want it a little bit bigger, I would do 2/3. If you are okay with it being a little bit smaller, I would go with half, right? So I'm going to go ahead and press my plastic knife through here. Okay, so I've got my halfway point. I'm going to set half of this off. I think this is still maybe even a little bit more than what I want. So you can always trim it down a little bit too. So I want to keep this small, like a little succulent planer was kind of my thought for this. Okay, so when I go to make this now, I need to get this into a sphere. So I'm going to tap on the corners here and kind of round them. Now, if this wasn't a cube, I could take and just kind of tap my block of clay to get it more into a cube shape. So we want it more to be square on each side. And now I can take and use my hands or even just kind of press to round the corners a little bit, because we're aiming to create a sphere. So now that I've kind of rounded those corners, I can use my hands to kind of compress it into more of a sphere. I could use my hands to kind of roll it. I could even roll it here on the surface. But the point is, we want to get it to be more of a sphere. Now, it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. We don't want to waste time trying to perfect this because we're going to alter it anyways. But it helps if it's round to start. So now I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to brace this with one hand, and I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to push it down right in the middle of my clay sphere. Okay, now be careful, we don't want to push all the way through. So your thumb should not come out the other side. We're going to push in. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our other fingers here to brace as we apply pressure from the inside. So my thumb is going to push out and against my other fingers. And what that does is it's going to pull the walls of my pinch pot outwards. So one of the things that we want to be careful with is that we don't leave too much clay in the base. So right now, if I kind of look at where it's at, I would guess I have about maybe a little less than an inch here. Another way you can check it, and I know it's really hard to see, let me see if I can get here. If I put my project in here and poke my toothpick through till I can feel it here, and then I pinch right here, I don't know if you can see that. I pinch where the toothpick is entering the clay. That tells me I have this much in the bottom of my pinch pot. Okay, that's too much clay. So I'm going to continue to pinch. So I'm going to press not only in the bottom, but I'm also going to press outwards. And when I do this, this helps to bring the walls of my pinch pot out. Now we are stretching the clay. We want to do this in little movements. We don't want to use Hulk pressure and destroy the walls. We want to try and keep our walls even in thickness too. We don't want to let it get too thin in one area. So again, kind of using that same even pressure. The width of the wall should be about the same width as our little finger. So if we place our pinky along the edge here, it should be about the same width for it, okay? Another thing I want to mention, sometimes I'll put both thumbs in my pinch pot and use my outside hands to kind of guide as I'm working my way around and making that a little bit wider. So you can see that little bit of clay made a pretty good sized pinch pot here for my planter or my I could even use this as like a ring holder or jewelry holder or paper clip holder. So I got a pretty good start here. So now I'm going to I have a container of water and I have a sponge. I'm going to dip my sponge in my water and I want to squeeze it out real good. I don't want to have a ton of water in the sponge or it will start to break down the clay. I want to just use it. Now you can see there's a hole there for my toothpick. I can just take my finger and kind of smooth that over and close that up. If I wanted to check again, I could do the step again and see. So now I only have this much in the bottom. That's a good amount of clay. So again, I can smooth that over. So where I have some big breaks, there are some different things. I like to use a wooden tool to smooth this, but because we are using some non-traditional materials, I can even take like the back of my plastic knife and kind of drag it over that crack there to smooth it. I like to use the back of my fingernail here, or the back of my finger where my fingernail is at. I will often use my fingernail and use that to smooth. Now it's not 100% perfect when I do this. You can sometimes see some grooves where I've moved the clay, and that's okay. That's when I come back in with a sponge. And again, I squeeze it out real good. And then I just wipe over it, and now that's a lot smoother. So I want you to take a moment and take some time to smooth out your pinch pot. So one thing that I sometimes hear from students after I fire the piece is, well, why is there still clay stuck there? Why can't I get it off of there? Why is there cracking there? Well, you didn't take the time to smooth it before we put it in the kiln. So it doesn't magically get smooth when we're firing it. So we need to take the time to smooth it right now and make it how we want it to be when it goes into the kiln. Now, something else you can do if you have it really uneven, you can turn it over and kind of tap it against the surface of the table, and that can kind of help flatten and even it out. And then sometimes I'll even just go back in then and kind of pinch it. Remember, we want our walls to be nice and even. So if I have a lot of extra clay, sometimes I will even kind of take my toothpick and kind of trim along there. So what we're going to do next is we're going to focus on the legs or the attached features like fins or wings. We're going to save our head for the second day because it's going to take us a little bit more time to construct and add all those details. So I'm really happy with how this is looking. So before I forget, my next step, I need to write my name on it, right? So I need to be able to tell whose pinch pot belongs to whom. So I want to take my toothpick. I'm going to carve my name in, so very carefully. I'm going to write my first name and last name. Yes, I want both. Keep in mind when I fire these, I fire them with other classes too. So just because you are the only Audrey in this class doesn't mean I don't have another Audrey later on in the day. So please make sure to write first and last name. Or right down below, I'm going to put HR for hour and then put hour 3. And then I like to put the year on here as well that I made it in. Now, one thing to consider that I forgot to mention, if you are planning to make like a sponge holder or a spoon rest, you actually wouldn't be writing on the side. So if you were planning to have them like opening go to the side, you would do all of that on the side. So instead of writing on the bottom, because this part would be visible, you would actually do your writing on the part that's going to sit against the table.